Before we begin, Sam, I know that our residence needs more window. Our windows are very naked, so we need one and $200 blinds.
Shuffle up and deal. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I am your host, East Coast Sam.
And I'm Legend of One of Poker Stars, and today we are going way back in time, about 20 years or so, into the old school poker world of Celebrity Poker Showdown, a somewhat long-lived show on that aired on the network Bravo TV, which I normally associate with stuff like Top Chef or Flipping Out or lots of fashion-y shows and stuff like that. So it was an interesting situation to see a program like this on that channel.
Yeah, it ran from 2003 to 2006, so right at the poker boom, the golden era of the poker boom, if you will. Just pretty typical game show, reality show on Bravo. In each episode, five celebrities face off against each other, raising money for charity. The winner of the episode gets a little silver chip, which moves them on to the finals. And then in the finals, the five winners face off against each other to raise even more money for their charity. Some stuff about this show I kind of liked. A lot of stuff about this show I didn't like so much, but obviously we'll break it all down.
Yeah, and the one constant throughout the show is the presence of a Mr. Phil Gordon. He functions as the one of the two commentators in the studio booth, Loser's Lounge, whatever you want to call it, with either Kevin Pollak at first and then Dave Foley afterwards. And Phil Gordon, he really kind of faded away from the poker world really after the mid 2000s. So you could almost kind of, for me, argue this is kind of his like peak, poker famedom, if you ask me. And the rest of the show is basically I don't want to say insult to poker, but it's a pretty awful poker on display on average, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, Phil Gordon was somebody obviously who popped up a lot sort of at this period of time in the early mid 2000s. I mean, just looking at his stats here, he never won a bracelet. He got fourth place in the main event in 2001, made 18 money finishes in the World Series of Poker, got one World Poker Tour title. And they keep trying to treat him like, oh, he's like a top mind of the game and all that. I mean, if you look at his stats, I mean, okay, like he has some skill, don't get me wrong, I'm not denying that. But it's not like he's a top tier poker player here. So, them saying like he's our poker expert, he's one of the best players in the world is a little weird. And I mean, I mean, Phil is just sort of the guy who, talks about whether or not he likes the celebrities' plays or not, which he usually doesn't like, which he says over and over again. And sometimes somebody in the loser's lounge will ask him a question like, what's the difference between four-handed and eight-handed? And he'll give a little explanation. He's not the most charismatic commentator in the world. I didn't think he wasn't mugging for the camera or anything. He was like okay for the most part. Kevin Pollak, as you know, has made a deep run in the main event, obviously after he did this show. Does like a weird Christopher Walken impression. Not super funny, in my opinion. Nothing terrible, but he's okay. And then Dave Foley, yeah, is sort of like the comic foil. He's the Norm to, Phil Gordon's Lawn. And yeah, I don't really find him funny at all. I don't think he's super charismatic. I don't think he comes off very well on screen. He does like these recurring jokes over and over again. Like in each episode, they do a little tape about hand rankings, and he'll do this introduction like, here's this little video on ranking hands directed by Kurosawa, and the next episode will be directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it just gets old really quick. Again, he seems like a decent guy. I'm not trying to say anything about him, but I don't really like him at all in this.
Yeah, he was, I think, a member of Kids in the Hall
Mhm.
back in the day. And then I also knew him because he was the judge of the short-lived American version of Thank God You're Here. And one of the jokes that a few reviewers I had about that show is that he was much better at improv than most of the celebrities on that show. And he does have what is clearly some scripted bits that he intermixes in along with some off-the-cuff comments here. And yeah, it was nothing that like I groaned too much about. I maybe I think I wrote down on my notes here maybe like three times I generally had a spark or a laugh at a moment or a line by somebody, and I think he was responsible for maybe one of them. But my first ever actual exposure to this show was actually just one hand from the show between Anthony Anderson and somebody else. I forget who it was, and it was a hand where Anthony had quads, and ran into Top Full House and just was like Hollywooding, which is kind of strange to even call it Hollywooding when there are celebrities. Maybe it's just normal wooding or something in this situation. And so it was, and also at the very end of the hand, he says like Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm fame is like, "Did you know you had the best hand?" He's like, "It's called bluffing." It's like that's not what happened. And so it kind of circles me back to it kind of did put me in the headspace of let's expect to see some really bad poker play. And we get every single kind of poker amateurish problems, like not knowing how much to raise, using the wrong terminology. I raise when they're just betting, or folding it when they can just check, or not knowing if their hand was the best hand or not, or overplaying like, queen high, king high here. Like every single like poker faux pas you can think of at some point in time was on display here.
Yeah, the poker play is very bad. I mean, obviously, it's a celebrity poker show. You're not expecting top tier poker play, but you'd at least expect some basic familiarity with what the rules are. I saw a lot of misraises that somebody would not raise the full 2x and then they would have to raise the full 2x. There were string raises at one point. Just very weird stuff. I mean, the fact that they're not minimally familiar with the game, that they're not given a primer, really, really hurts this for me all throughout the entire show. And it's also odd because there's often little interview sections with the players, and they'll say something like, "Oh, yeah, I used to play poker when I was a kid. I got into the casino with my castmates and we play poker." And yet you don't see any poker prowess at all on display. Again, all the way down to just the basic rules of raising 2x that raises 2x at the previous bet. Just very odd.
Yeah, and and the show, so we what we did for this watch is that we watched one episode from each season as close to the beginning of the season as possible. There was some missing spots here and there, so I think seasons 5 and 8 are entirely not available on YouTube or anything easily watchable, so we couldn't watch those. And when you compare year to year, really not a whole lot changes. I mean, there's maybe like 5 things I can point to that were a distinct season to season change, but the structure, the look, and the format of the show pretty much is identical from the beginning of the show to the end of the show.
One thing I will say is that, again, as I mentioned, you're not expecting top tier poker action. The celebrities here are having fun. They're jovial. There's, some friendly jousting and friendly competition here. That's the part of the show that I like the most, that it's laid back. It's just people trying to have fun. Everybody kind of knows that they stink at poker, and there's, again, some good ribbing back and forth. It's the overall vibe of that among the celebrities that I like the best.
Yeah, and also because this is a bit more laid back, some things happen in these games that wouldn't happen in a regular poker tournament, cash game, or tournament. Things like the audience influencing the action by saying "Go all in," or like cheering, or even like booing when someone folds when if they have the worst hand. You can't just boo somebody for that. Or the floorman kind of getting in with them, or the dealer interacting with the players, or the waitresses or waiters, goofing around, or joking about the loser's lounge where I'm gonna end up going there next if I lose this hand, stuff like that. Again, it's stuff that you wouldn't see, which is why this show has at least some unique elements to it. But again, going back to the top here, so this is all played at the Palms Casino. The first, all but the last season, we're playing for what was referred to as a $250,000 prize pool. So if you lost in your first game, you get $5,000, and then if you win, you move on to the final table, and then for each spot you move up, you earn more money for your charity of $100,000 going to first place. And at each point in time, I think all charities are given at least 2 or 3 name drops throughout the episode apiece, depending on how the celebrity did. And obviously the star power of the players playing would vary because again, you're talking like 30 celebrities per season here, or 25, whatever it was. So you're going to have some people that are a bit more prominent, or a bit more big names like. I actually thought that season one probably had the biggest names by 2025 standards compared to maybe '03 standards. I'm not sure how everyone ranks up. And for the most part, I knew, to my surprise, actually, for each episode we saw, I knew a different number of the celebrities in advance of the episode. Like for some, I knew the whole cast. Some I knew only one or two. Some I knew all but one, all but two. So it was kind of funny to see how much of Hollywood I really knew.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing that was good is that they got actual celebrities. I mean, right here in the first episode, you have Ben Affleck, David Schwimmer, and Don Cheadle, who I'd say like are actual stars. They're actually notable people who've had substantial careers. And again, there's a couple of those names that go throughout the show. So they're not getting, Kato Kaelin and Tanya Harding here. They're actually getting people who are, famous and notable in their fields, which is kind of nice. And again, everybody just kind of knows the score. There are a couple episodes that are themed episodes. There'll be like a ladies' night or an episode that's focused on a particular show like Desperate Housewives, which was a very big show at the time. So, they'll do little themed episodes like that to change things up a little bit. And again, because they all sort of know each other, there's a little bit more jousting that goes on, a little bit more meat on the bones of their banter. And again, that's nice to see.
Yeah, and the big difference when season one first aired was that aired in a 1 hour block. So you're talking about 45 minutes of episode. And I actually thought that given how the later seasons flowed, I thought that having 2 hours instead of 1 hour actually was a better thing, even if all my complaints, I thought that the season one was a bit too cramped, and we didn't see too much of the players really giving much personality. Like I thought that by having 2 hours, even if there was a lot of things that would blow my eyes, I thought that it definitely kind of needed that extra hour for to give each player at least a little bit of spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, it adds a little bit more room. There's a little bit more time to banter and to let things develop at the table. It's just, again, for the most part, as you mentioned, just some really odd hand selections, really odd pre-flop play, really odd post-flop play all the way through. It is kind of funny, again, with the 2025 poker mindset, knowing about, laptops at the table and solvers and GTO and all that, just imagining these people. I mean, yeah, a player from 2025 and 2003 would, if you transport that 2025 player back to 2003, oh my God, I mean, they'd be crushing it. Just
I
kind of
mean,
crazy.
a lot of the poker players just remind me of when I was like 10, 12, 13 years old, where like if I had king seven, queen six, oh, that's a good hand. I like it. And a lot like players pretty much never fold queen six from the big blind, no matter what happens in these episodes, which is kind of funny. With this first episode though, I do say, rest in peace, Willie Garson. It was kind of sweet to see a couple to see celebrities, play, at least win in their episodes here. I feel bad that this is like kind of my last, association with them, if I most likely. With these, each episode has bits, so to speak, in that for the most part you have there's a relatively kind of slick animation intro video for each season, which I think is kind of nice, and I kind of like the theme song. It's kind of like
Hmm.
I think I wasn't against that music choice actually. And then there's usually a how to play video, which goes unchanged the entire time. They reuse it, although Dave Foley's line to introduce it does change. And then I believe from season two onward, they add the what beats what bits, which demarcates the lowest possible best hand to royal flush, ace high versus to royal flush, which again goes unchanged. They recycle that bit from year to year, which I guess. I'm I guess it's okay to do as it doesn't take the longest, but at the same time, you'd think maybe if you're watching season seven of Celebrity Poker Showdown, you probably know how the game is played. But what do I know?
Yeah, I mean, they're each about a minute long, so they're not too bad. I mean, I just kind of skipped through them after I watched them, maybe two or three times, saw that they weren't changing. Another sort of format thing is that toward the start of the episode, they do a little interview segment with each player. I'm Ben Affleck and I'm playing for X charity. And then usually during the interview, the person will give their thoughts on the other four people at the table, talk a little bit about their poker experience. That happens in pretty much every single episode. And they also sort of, plug their charity a little bit, which again was nice to see that they would actually, say the name of the charity a couple times. In later episodes, they talk a little bit longer about what the purpose of the charity is. I liked that. Even if some of the charities may be a bit more better than others, this is a poker-free podcast, so I'll respect that. Um, but yeah, that was kind of nice to see. I mean, the interviews themselves, they're just sort of sitting in some room or something. I guess it could be the losers lounge. I don't know. There's sort of garish background. And then while they're kind of talking, they have these like little bits of them like toying with cards. They'll be like, if this is like an ace, they'd be like, stuff like that, which is kind of tacky. But they're having fun. I guess it's kind of forgivable.
Yeah, and again, for the most part, most players get, the first interview is about their charity and how they got into poker, how they know much poker. Then the second one maybe is about all the other players at the table, and then if they're in the heads up, there might be a third one about them and the other player as far as their mentality. But that's really good. There's, I mean, outside of maybe a few, bits here of cutting to the losers lounge with Dave and Phil, maybe discussing who they think will win or how the game's been so far. There's not too much else like the nut segment that is off the beaten path as far as having these bare-bone interviews.
Well, there is this feature which I think starts in season two, which is what would you have done? Which is basically like the Jack Link's beef jerky hand, where you know one player's cards, but you don't know the other player's cards, and kind of have to guess, you play in their mind what act as that player's who you see the cards for and sort of decide what the other players have at the table. And Phil and Dave sort of guess about what these other players have and what they don't have based on their actions, which is like an okay little feature to do. Again, it's about a minute long, doesn't take too long on the episode. Though, maybe it could have been a bit more punchier in some of the hands. I mean, some of the hands, nothing really happened. There's a lot of hands featured, by the way, that are just raise and takes it, which is kind of disappointing to see, especially in the 1.5 hour episodes. Not so much in episode one, but later on, a lot of just raise and takes it, which again, I think is okay in heads up. But otherwise, I mean, you're clearly cutting some hands out of the show. I think you could cut those hands out too.
Yeah, that bit actually begins in season three onward, actually. And I
Mhm.
thought it was a good idea to incorporate that, but the main issue I had was that Phil Gordon talks over the hand way too much and doesn't really leave much room for the audience member watching the show to think things through because it's not really what we would do, it's what Phil would do.
Yeah.
And for the most part, he's usually saying what a player should do mid-hand anyway. So really, it amounted to the same thing regardless of the the editing trick of showing everyone else's cards with a question mark. Um, Besides that, yeah, there's really not too much else. The only other differences really was for there was one season, I want to say season three, they began the blinds at 50 and 100 rather than 100 and 200, which
Hmm.
they quickly discarded because they were right back to 100, 200 in the next season. So it was a little bit of a strange choice to try that. I guess they wanted to give players more big blinds to play with. Maybe Phil Gorman's like, hey, let's give them one more level to, mess around with because there were certain seasons where that first bust out wouldn't go until maybe level four, level five, level six, and there were other times where maybe a player busted in level, three or so. And also it seemed like a lot of players. There was actually one joke I laughed at. I think it was in season six or something, where Caroline Rhea was. I think it was a joke from Phil Gordon saying that she still has. It's the comedic bubble because she still has more material, so she can't bust yet in the action. I thought that was kind of a clever line actually. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple lines among the players that I like. Again, the banter is very amicable. But, nothing I found super hilarious. Again, there's just some sort of friendly rivalries that form. People get nicknames because they're hitting a run of cards or something that I kind of liked. Nothing that was, oh my God, so hilarious. I gotta watch that again. But, something that you just sort of appreciate, an attempt at humor, an attempt at amicability, which is nice.
And I did like how we had the losers lounge where not only does a player go there after they bust and they say, "Oh, I try my best," but they will on occasion comment with Phil and Dave about a hand, or I'll cheer for one player, or just kind of interrupt. I mean, again, because that's not something we really ever see in any other poker show. So that was again a unique element that I appreciated.
Yeah, they had a television in there so they could comment on it supposedly while it was happening live. I mean, it might have been shot afterward, but and then afterward, after the heads up happens, usually the other players come out to congratulate the winner, which is kind of a nice gesture. So yeah, it's nice.
And then each season would more or less have a different sponsor that would be displayed during the chip standing. So a lot of times after a commercial break, Dave and Phil would have a little bit, and then they would say, "Let's cut to the chip standings." And it'd be, it could be cellular, singular wireless, or it could be, net zero internet, which a bunch of really obscure, non-mainstream sponsors, which would be the chips. And again, it was not as intrusive as other add Milwaukee's best light is brings you world not nearly as bad because it's just a part of the graphic.
Yeah, one other thing was that the chip counts were read at the end of each commercial break, which I kind of appreciated because you get to see how stacks are consolidating. And there'd often be a little bit of banter between Dave and Phil, like, oh, time, Phil, you should go read the chip counts because you love reading the chip counts. But I appreciate that those stacks were spelled out so that you understand what exactly was going on as time happened.
But probably the biggest complaint, ignoring the poker play, would just be not having the poker odds on screen during a hand. Like Phil Gordon, to his credit, does chime in with what the odds are a hand holds up fairly often. Not every hand, not even every
Mhm.
other hand, but a lot of the important hands. But I would have liked just to have it there because I think the average BravoTV viewer wouldn't know the numbers off the top of their head.
Yeah, I mean, that's my biggest problem with the graphics. I mean, my biggest problem overall with this is the audience because it's just them applauding after every single chip is put in the pot, them shouting out, go all in, go all in. That got, I mean, I don't think that should be allowed, that the audience should influence action like that, number one. Number two, that just got so annoying. I mean, by the end of this first episode, I had a headache. Like, I'm not gonna lie, and I was really dreading watching the rest of these. And I kind of got used to it a little bit, but yeah, like I was really annoyed just at how loud the audience was. Very
I mean,
bad.
it annoyed me too, but I was probably more annoyed at our floorman constantly saying $1 and $200 blinds, let's go. Even when the blinds weren't bigger from his last announcements, like it felt like they almost had during the ad breaks or during the like some sort of artificial break, they would have maybe have an interview or two, and then they'd come back to the table, and then he would just have to reset what the blinds are. But it just really annoyed me that part more than anything else.
Yeah, that was annoying too.
But anyway, so again, you mentioned season one was Ben Affleck, Don Cheadle, Willie Garson, Emily Proctor, and David Schwimmer. I didn't
Hmm.
know who Emily Proctor was, but I was familiar with the other guys. And during that first interview bit for each celebrity, they'll show on the screen like some of their recent film credits. And I had forgotten that Willie Garson was in Freaky Friday. I wasn't sure if it was referring to the original Freaky Friday or the '03 one with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. I guess Garson was a patient of Jamie Lee Curtis's character, but I just didn't remember that scene. So I saw that film as a kid. I just didn't remember him. So it was kind of funny reading that out loud to myself. For the most part, again, with only 1 hour to play with, it just kind of felt more like playing Thanksgiving family poker than it was like actual poker. That was kind of one of my notes there. And then I felt that I didn't like the episode, but I was kind of entertained. So I was kind of in a weird funk with that first episode from season one.
Yeah, I mean, Emily was on The West Wing, I believe. I think she was only on a couple seasons and like a couple other TV shows. So I kind of knew who she was. I mean, I remember watching like a couple episodes of Sex and the City, so seeing Willie Garson, and then obviously Ben Affleck, David Schwimmer, and Don Cheadle. I know. So yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised seeing those five folks walk out, knowing all five of them, being like, "Oh, okay, they actually got celebrities." That was my first response. And yeah, as you mentioned, it's just kind of like Thanksgiving poker play. I mean, a lot of hands just kind of play themselves. A lot of aces are played, but also you have a lot of like 7-5 suiteds, 10-9s, things like that. Just sort of weird hands to play.
And
And yeah,
and
I mean, it
really
was an interesting what.
and really not that many premium hands. Like I feel like I could count on my fingers how many aces, kings, and queens we ever saw, and I was quite surprised honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's pocket tens at one point in this episode. There's pocket queens in another point. But yeah, nothing too premium. Again, a lot of just kind of middling hands, which again makes me wonder why this was featured on the show. I mean, if you're trying to get exciting poker action, what is Ben Affleck going to do against Don Cheadle? It's like, but you have a hand where he has got 10-9 offsuit and the other one's got queen six offsuit. It's just kind of weird, the hand selection. Um, yeah, I mean, again, it's nothing too offensive. It's nothing where I was like, oh my God, this is so terrible. But yeah, I mean, the crowd just really got to me by the end of this. I was really just dreading it by the end. I think the headache started about the 40-minute mark. I can't quite tell. But yeah, very annoying.
Yeah, but and again, it just was the final two ends up being Ben Affleck, who we know from those early 2000s main events was poker taught by Annie Duke, and so I kind of there were a few players that definitely knew the game substantially better than the rest of the table, and so Ben Affleck definitely struck to me as one of those guys. Unfortunately, he doesn't manage to win. Willie has the lead heads up against him, and Willie holds wins essentially a flip to win. And by that point, Willie, we didn't watch the final table of any of these episodes after the words, but I almost had a tear in my eye seeing the deceased Willie Garson take this down, though. I will say that.
Yeah, and Willie seemed like a nice guy, so it was kind of nice to see that. I mean, he's sort of treated as the bad guy because he knocked everybody out, but it seems like a nice guy, and he kind of understands he got lucky. I mean, I think Ben Affleck won like the California State poker tournament or something, so it's a bit of an upset, I guess. So yeah, it
I mean,
was
he
nice.
did in heads up. He did call 15,000 with queen high when Ben had queen. So one of the worst calls I've ever seen in my entire life. But hey, at least I can say I saw one of the worst calls of my entire life from watching that episode.
Very, very true.
So again, with season two, that's where we replaced Kevin Pollak with Dave Foley. Again, Pollak, with only 45 minutes to really analyze him, he didn't really do anything to leave too much in my head as far as him being a bad or positive force in the booth with Phil Gordon. But Foley will stay in the booth from seasons two to season eight. And then actually in season eight, which we couldn't find, Phil Hellmuth does replace Phil Gordon, which was a shame because I love Hellmuth. I would have loved to have seen him criticize these celebrities' poker play, but regardless. With the lineup and the episode that we saw here, we had Jerome Bettis, who we saw as a player in the $1 Million Challenge of Daniel Negreanu. which is kind of cool. Because again, this predates it by quite a few years, so it was just fun to see him. And this is before he won a Super Bowl too, so it's just kind of a fun little snapshot in the bus's history. Then we had Rosario Dawson, Mina Suvari, Wanda Sykes, and Travis Tritt, who I've never heard of before, and I really barely, if at all, know Dawson.
I've heard of Jerome Bettis. Rosario Dawson, I have heard of. She's been on a bunch of shows and films over the years. Mina Suvari, I think, was in American Beauty, I think. So I think I've heard of
American
that.
Pie.
Yeah. And Wanda Sykes, I know from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Then, yeah, Travis Tritt, I'd never heard of. Like Wanda Sykes to me, I think probably was just the most talkative, the most sort of entertaining out of any of the celebrities featured in these episodes. And Travis, I thought, came off pretty well too. Like he kind of came off as a bit more gruff. He's a country musician. I think he's won a couple Grammys. And he's sort of like, because people think of country music as sort of bass and country musicians as kind of stupid, he used that to his advantage and was self-deprecating. And then Wanda was just cracking jokes about everyone and everything and really just leaned into her role as an entertainer, which I really appreciated.
I mean, I appreciate her trying to be funny. I thought that she was trying to hog the spotlight a little bit too much, and maybe wasn't as funny. Like again, comedy is so subjective, but I feel like a lot of the humor by the celebrities is all kind of like just, oh, look at me, I'm being, crazy, obnoxiously loud or whatnot. And I didn't find it particularly funny or anything. I found it, noteworthy, just not, I mean, not funny. We get a sense here of Dave's different style. Like he gets a bit more time to sort of work some jokes like before the game begins when he
Mhm.
introduces all the players and he adds a few puns here and there. None of them are funny, but he's always trying. With the table here, though, it's kind of surprising. The ladies really kind of dominate this game. I mean, they are very aggressive. They're inducing some bad folds from the other guys. Jerome Bettis makes some pretty horrible folds a couple times, especially to Wanda. And the final two actually ends up being the two ladies in this game.
Yeah, I mean, Jerome Bettis, said like, "Oh, I play poker with my NFL players, and I have a lot of experience." But yeah, I just don't see that. I mean, that's again sort of what I brought up before about these people. Like, I've been playing poker since I was 6 years old. I'm ready to go, and then they're just playing weird hands. One thing that I thought was kind of nice about Jerome Bettis, he had a bus card protector, and he'd kind of push it across the table. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And then there was a moment where Wanda mocks the Flow Man and actually makes a Pluto Nash dish, a dish on the Adventures of Pluto Nash to our Sarah Darson, which I thought was kind of a funny little specific insult. Usually, you don't see too often a celebrities, name dropping one particular project and hurting somebody. Like it reminded me of Norm Macdonald during the chairman of the board with Conan interview with the female lead of that movie. That kind of reminded me of that in a good way.
Yeah, Wanda had a lot of snipes, I guess you could say. Like there's a hand against Jerome Bettis where she goes, "If I knock a brother out, I'm going to lose my NAACP card." And I was not expecting that line. I was like, "Wow." She really brought out the big guns for this. So yeah, I mean that's what I like from her is that she's just willing to go that extra mile with her lines and be snipey like that. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that again, this was the first iteration of the what means what bit, and I thought that that actually was handled in a pretty well way. I think Dave Foley did say the right things when they were producing that little video. I didn't think it was incorrect or anything. I just wish that they might have updated it or something or changed it from year to year.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, who is watching the show in season 8? I mean, probably somebody who's seeing the WSOP on television, knows a little bit about poker. I mean, yeah, it's on the Bravo network, so I mean, I don't quite know what the overlap between Bravo and poker is. But on the other hand, you're airing the show like it's a poker show on Bravo, so you must assume as a broadcaster that there's some overlap. So it is a little weird that they would have that to begin with and then, wouldn't change it as time goes on.
And there really weren't too many poker moves or plays that I thought were super interesting or no, but there was one here, and it was actually on Mina Suvari's bust out hand where she shoves a pair of sevens on the river and gets called by pocket eights by Rosario to bust and fourth. And I thought to myself, at least she was kind of trying to like it was like a weird hand. It was one of the few times when someone turned a hand with showdown value into a bluff of sorts. And I thought that was even though it wasn't it was just I'm not sure if it was a bad play or not. That's why I'm thinking about it so much.
Yeah, I mean it's at least something of a play, and it was something of a bit of a tricky spot for Rosario because it wasn't, her eights weren't top pair. So yeah, it was nice that that happened. But again, I mean, for the most part, it's just a lot of weird hand selections. Probably the biggest problem with all these players across the board is just hand selections. A lot of hands that you just shouldn't be defending your big blind with. You shouldn't be calling a raise with. You just shouldn't be playing at all. I mean, yeah, 10-9 suited looks kind of cool, but I mean, you should just let it go and move on to a different
I
spot.
also think probably the biggest offense, if you ask me, though, was raising an amount that would never induce a fold by a better hand or get a worse hand to fold, because they, two bet, three bet is only a min raise or something like that, where the raise accomplishes nothing besides putting more money in the pot when, you're not the favorite to win, or there's no the chips mean more to you than how much you're risking.
Yeah, so many min raises. Oh my God. It's not until really the last episode that you start to see 3x raises and aggressive raises. Just so many min raises over. And Phil just keeps saying over and over again, like a tape recorder, this was a bad raise. This is a bad spot to do this in. So yeah.
Yeah, and the blinds begin at 100, 200, then it goes 2, 4, 3, 6, 4, 8, 500, 1,000, and then they always go to 1K, 2K. There's no like 612 or 816 or anything like that, which usually doesn't, by heads up play, that usually means that the action's pretty close to finishing anyway, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And in this episode here between Wanda and Rosario, the final two, it's probably the heads up match that has the least amount of time dedicated to it. I think there was only 5 minutes left in the episode when Heads Up began, whereas most of the other episodes usually had at least 10 or 15 minutes to spare by the end to give us a few more hands than just one.
Yeah, there's only three hands, and none of them are especially good. I mean, Rosario wins spiking a nine with King Nine versus Wanda's King Queen. So, kind of a nice, like, oh, it's a surprise that she spikes the nine, but nothing that especially grabs my attention.
Yeah. Which then we get to season three here, and this is again where we have the how would you play it segment is where it begins here, and also they add the coming up next preview before an ad break. And normally I hate these, but I don't know, I kind of didn't hate it because considering that I didn't actually care who won or that I thought the poker was a joke, I thought that they're at least trying to make things sound spicier than maybe how they would. But like next coming up, someone's gonna go all in. What will happen to her? Or the chip wheel will change hands. Check it out. Like I thought that was okay. I don't know. I thought it was okay with me.
Yeah, it's okay to do something like that. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and so our celebs this time we have Jenny Garth, Dave Navarro, Richard Kind, Jerry O'Connell, and the returning Willie Garson. And he had won season one, so look at his name, like I guess mentioned early on in the action. And so with this cast here, I know Richard Kind from a few obscure projects, and then primarily Scrubs and Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think he's very good. He's one of my favorites for both shows, honestly. I think his character is a lot of fun. I didn't know Dave Navarro. I only know Jenny Garth from like some Lifetime film about HIV. And then Willie Garson, we obviously knew. I forgot to mention that, he was probably a key member of my favorite scene in the film Fever Pitch, the dancing scene. So I give him, I'm gonna name drop that scene, of course. And Jerry O'Connell, I know from only two things: Kangaroo Jack and Joe's Apartment.
Yeah, Richard Kind I knew from Scrubs and Curb, and then Jerry O'Connell from Kangaroo, which I saw in theaters, by the way. I saw Kangaroo Jack in theaters. I saw the trailer. I thought, okay, talking kangaroo, this is going to be great. And I dragged my dad into the movie theater, and And then, yeah, obviously I knew Willie Garson from season one. But yeah, Jenny Garth I never really heard of. And then Dave Navarro, once I went on his Wikipedia page and saw, oh, he's the lead singer for Jane's Addiction and other bands. I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I've heard that name before, but I've never heard his music or anything.
Yeah, and so with this episode, unfortunately, the video quality was very blurry and poor on YouTube, so it actually made it hard to even see the players' cards on the screen, which luckily Phil does normally announce out loud what, oh, he's got, 10-6, but nonetheless, you had to pay a bit more attention if you really wanted to. This probably was the one of the weakest and slowest episodes of the bunch here because only two hands are shown in the first 15 minutes of the episode, and also, they shoved in so many interviews in the very beginning, and they also just didn't really impress me with poker play. What a big shocker!
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, nothing really grabbed my attention in terms of exciting personalities. I mean, you mentioned how you felt Wanda Sykes kind of playing to the crowd. I felt Richard Kind was trying way too hard to play up to the crowd and get attention. And there's, nothing that super exceptionally grabbed my attention or anything. It is, the whole, oh, evil Willie is back. I mean, they tried to jam that narrative down your throat, but Willie seems like an okay guy. Like, it doesn't seem like a bad person. He's trying to win a poker game. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah.
And I kind of felt that Willie kind of played the best of the table anyway, so he definitely had D minus D poker skills versus all these Fs around the table here. And the only thing that Richard Kind did that I kind of found amusing was when he talked into the camera and said, "I have 6-2, I'm folding," out loud. That was kind of funny, I guess, because he was last to act, so it was totally fine for him to do that. But outside of that, besides Willie was showing off his tattoos to the crowd, which is kind of amusing, I guess. And then there was one funny joke from Jerry O'Connell in the losers' lounge where, oh no, Richard's going to join me on the couch when he was going to potentially lose a hand to Willie when there was an all-in pre-flop, but Willie actually lost the hand, so it went out. So that was amusing. And then I was amused that Willie criticized Richards calling his all-in of ace-3 when it was blind versus blind. That showed a level of poker analysis that we hadn't seen among anybody else up to this point.
Yeah.
But otherwise, really, I mean, again, the formula of the show at this point is pretty much was established in my head. Everyone walks out, they play two hands. We'll show the standings after only two hands. We'll have everyone get one interview before they bust out, maybe a second one if they're not out yet, and then someone will win. And in this case, Dave Navarro wins, and he was kind of like the chip leader quietly the whole episode, but really we didn't see him accumulate many chips. I was kind of surprised by that choice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to look over my notes here, and yeah, I mean, he'd been the chip leader for most of it, not like the huge runaway chip leader until toward the end. Yeah, like there's no real moves that he made that particularly impressed me. He seems like a nice guy. I'm not trying to say anything bad about him, but I'm not really seeing anything that like really stood out to me in terms of his poker play. He just kind of managed to stay on top, make the fewest mistakes, and win.
Yeah, even after he made the mistake of folding the best hand against Jenny when she 3x shoved ace high at one point, which didn't make any sense because she had shown value if you asked me if ace high in that spot, but it did work, I guess. But she could have just checked it back. With this episode though, I did find that the heads up play was actually pretty good because Richard Kind is like in the bottom tier of like poker knowledge, so that he was just surprised to even be in the final two to begin with, and he did double up a couple times to take the lead, and it was a pretty back and forth given we only had a few minutes for the heads up match.
Yeah.
And so halfway here now to season 4, with the sponsor being Net Zero Internet, a cast again that half knew and half didn't know. So we have Sarah Silverman, Matthew Perry, rest in peace, Christopher Maloney, Stephen Root, and Michael Vartan. And so I actually didn't realize who Stephen Root was. I didn't realize he was the Office-based dodgeball actor because he, looks different than he did in those movies. So it wasn't until after I'd watched the episode that I realized that's who he was.
Yeah, Stephen Root, I knew also he's a big partner with the Coen brothers. He's been in a bunch of their movies. He was in No Country for Old Men, among other movies that he's done.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sarah Silverman and Matthew Perry, I both knew from a lot of different things. Christopher Maloney, I know that he was on CSI. Like I've maybe seen him somewhere else. Like he just there's something about him that stands out to me. And then Michael Vartan, kind of the same thing. Like I can't quite recall where I've seen those two in something, but I've seen those two around.
And Maloney was in one episode of Scrubs as well, much like Richard Kind was.
Hmm.
So that I knew him from that as well. With this season, though, they also add one no little tiny feature where both of the hosts will pick somebody to win. And usually they kind of say, oh, it's a curse to be picked by us, but we'll see what happens here. And actually, in this case, Phil Gordon's pick, which is Matthew Perry, does win. And again, it did seem like we had perhaps the most dominating performance by any player in CPS here with Matthew Perry's performance here.
Yeah, and again, he's somebody who just kind of stays on top, makes the fewest mistakes, even though he's not, again, ever really the runaway chip leader at any point. But he really doesn't act out of line, so good for him. And he actually does manage to pick up some premium hands. You get to see pocket kings on the last hand, for an example. So, a little bit more exciting action than previous episodes.
Yeah, but it was also at this point that I realized that in this tournament structure, you're not allowed to muck your cards at the river. Like I feel like maybe they were so afraid somebody would muck the winning hand if they didn't table their cards, even if they were last to act and they were shown a better card than their by their opponents. Like so, it was just kind of funny. I guess again, it's not real poker when you have roles like that, I guess. But it was not until here that I realized that.
Yeah, I mean, I was okay with that as a gesture. They want to make sure that nobody mucks the winning hand. That's true. And, often people would ask each other, like, what did you have? And there was some times where some people would show cards unsolicited. So, it's okay to do that.
Yeah, and probably the biggest headline moment of the episode was Sarah Silverman crawling on the table after going all in, and then the dealer actually rivers the final deals with the final card on her back, and thus busting her. I mean, it was kind of silly, but I guess it was something that stood out to me as far as moments in this episode.
Also caressing the felt, which like they did something like, all right, it's been 7 minutes, we got to caress the felt, and so everybody just started getting into it for some reason. Not really funny or interesting, but yeah, just sort of something that stood out to me.
And there was probably one of the low-key most moronic poker moments where Sarah doesn't realize that if she calls from the small blind, there's no guarantee she'll see the flop. Like she doesn't seem to realize that the big blind could just raise. And so I don't understand what she was thinking there.
Neither do I. Again, they really just needed to do a basic premiere with each of the players about how the rules of poker work.
Right. And then besides that, again, it was kind of nice to see a deceased celebrity take it down the win. I do feel that in this case he did deserve it. He played by far the best of the table. And so Matthew Perry, we'll miss you. I never really watched Friends, but you were also on Scrubs for an episode, so I guess props to you for that.
He was on Punked. I remember him being on Punked and kind of taking it well. And then I think he was in a couple other movies I've seen. So
Mhm.
rest in peace.
And then we get to the ladies' edition of Celebrity Poker Showdown with season 6, episode 3 being the only season 6 content I could find on YouTube. With the sponsor this time being something called Beck's Premier Lights, whatever the heck that is. I've never heard of that brand. We have Carolyn Rhea, who I know mostly from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, although she was, I think, the host of her own talk show. I guess she was on The Biggest Loser as the host. I never knew that, but I guess cool. Then we had Kathy Najimy, who I've never heard of. Sharon Lawrence, who I just know from like the Shaggy Dog 1994 version. Pretty much that's it, as the mom. And then Catherine Morris and Ricky Lake, neither of whom I know either.
Yeah, Karen Ray I knew from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which was kind of like a guilty pleasure of mine growing up.
Mhm.
I liked that sitcom. Ricky Lake I knew of because she had a talk show that was pretty popular like a while. I just knew the name Ricky Lake. And then the other three I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, and again, this season was a pretty much an identical structure to the last couple. There weren't any major changes. But again, with I think Caroline Rhea was kind of trying to like want to like kind of control the spotlight, try to be the most loudest and most funny, I guess. There wasn't a ton that she did that I found particularly funny, but she was at least trying, I guess. But she was also multiple times not allowed to f open fold, which you could check by the foreman, which again, much like not allowed to muck her cards, like they're just like giving them the most like Monopoly Junior version of this game at times.
Yeah, Caroline seemed to be the most clueless about how poker worked out of absolutely everybody on the show. So that was kind of funny to me. Yeah, just weird, multiple times trying to open fold, not really knowing how bet sizes worked, not knowing how hand selection works. So that was kind of funny to see. That was interesting.
Yes, and she actually does make it into third place somehow. So I guess props to her for not blowing it that badly, because we see Catherine and Ricky busting before her. Otherwise, to my surprise here, they didn't have a single interview for the first 17 minutes of the episode. So it definitely felt like that they were all over the place as far as their structuring of how often to have interviews and what spot of the episode. And really, most of these, even though Caroline was by far the worst player, all five of them really played pretty horribly, if you ask me. And I felt that maybe Sharon played the most controlled poker, but at the same time, she really played pretty horribly when it got to heads up too.
Yeah, and there were a lot of premium hands. There were a lot of ace queens, jacks, ace king suited. Ace king was dealt a number of times. So to kind of see these folks misplay these premium hands. I mean, with ace king, like even if you don't really know how poker works, I'm sure you know like that's a premium hand. I should make a raise here on the flop. I might be good, so I should lead out. Just little things like that. But they just don't even seem to pick up on that, which is kind of shocking.
And there's just so many moments in this episode. I thought this was probably the worst poker of the whole. whole lot, honestly. I
Yeah.
just wanted to
Mhm.
ask them, like, okay, you're in this hand. What the hell are you doing? Why did you not just fold here? What were you thinking? What were you hoping was going to happen? And they'd be like, I don't know. Probably they're just. I can't imagine a intelligent person having a reasonable rationale for why they wouldn't make a certain play with half of these hands, I feel like.
Well, again, the poker play throughout is so bad that saying like this is the worst out of all of them isn't really saying very much. But yeah, as I mentioned, just a lot of strange plays throughout this episode.
Yeah. And again, in the end, Kathy Najimy wins, and I don't know how she did it with. Let me just double check here. Let's see how she did in the. Let's see. She finished. Oh, she won the whole thing. Wow. Jesus. Okay.
Funny.
Interesting. All right. Well, that solves that. Maybe she got some coaching in between the filming of this table and the final. I don't know, but good for her, I guess. She surprised me. I sit corrected.
Hmm.
With season seven, though, probably the biggest and I guess most exciting change here is the prize pool. Got a noticeable jump here. It went from a quarter million up to an even million by the sponsor of Cadillac, which, oh, big shocker. Cadillac is probably the most noteworthy brand sponsor of the lot here. So I guess I wasn't too surprised by that.
Yeah, and this episode is a themed episode with five male co-stars on the show Desperate Housewives, which I know of that show, but I'd never heard of,
Same.
never seen, I saw any of it. And then of the players here, I only really knew Stephen Culp, just vaguely hearing that name. I think he was also on The West Wing.
Mhm.
But beside that, I didn't know who Ricardo Chavera was, James Denton, Doug Savant, or Mark Moses. Didn't know
Yeah,
who they
I
were.
didn't know any of these guys. I've never seen any of the Desperate Housewives program. I think I could probably name like one or two of the ladies that are on the show. I think Kate Walsh, and I can't name anybody else, honestly. So I didn't know these guys, and luckily it didn't hurt the episode as far as their interplay. I thought that them all knowing each other actually was a good thing because they could be a bit more specific with their jabs and jokes of each other. But I thought that this is probably, as far as their presence at the table, probably the most forgettable table of the bunch we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, they're bantering with each other and they do little in-jokes about their characters. Like one guy plays a plumber, and so they kind of rib him on that. Ricardo keeps bringing up that he's Mexican American and Hispanic, which just kind of gets old after a while. I don't like those jokes. At least they're not hamming it up too much like Wanda Sykes was. But there's a little bit of playing to the crowd here and there, and then of course the crowd just keeps going, "Ah, please go in the folder," which is just so annoying.
And
But yeah, at least yeah.
yeah, but also, I also thought about the show in retrospect. Was it too much to have two guys in the booth plus the foreman constantly announcing the action? She folds. And he raises it to 600. That's 400 more. He shows the kings like just there's three different voices constantly in the background plus the players. There was just too many voices in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, there's the audience, there's the players, there's the guy reading the cards, and then there's the announcers. So there's four layers of noise all on top of each other. So it's no wonder it kept getting headaches. It's like it's just sensory overload.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned it earlier, but there was one brief bit where Mark, after he's busted in the Losers Lounge, asks Phil Gordon about the difference between playing a four-handed versus eight-handed. And I thought that if you just could add maybe one or two more of those moments along with the how to play video and the what beats what video, then you would at least have just enough to say that we are trying to provide some poker education to the audience, but they didn't quite uh, at least in the ones we saw. Maybe there are other episodes that did that more, but at least what we saw here, we didn't get much of that.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I really have to add is this annoying habit of Stephen Culp when he would bet chips. He'd like pick up his chips and then he kind of like stack them in one hand like this and then bet. Like, I don't know why that just got on my nerves for some reason. It was a pet peeve of mine, but that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, otherwise, again, the poker action, not too memorable, really. It ends up being won by Stephen Culp. I felt that he definitely played among the better of the five. Again, I didn't really care too much about who won this at all. Big shocker. And again, that just kind of is our little summary here. What do you think, Sam? I mean, a show is not the worst poker show we've seen, not the best, obviously. I was entertained by the ridiculousness of the show at times. I was bored and astounded by some of the bad play. So it definitely was memorable, I guess I would say, at least.
Yeah, it's memorable. But again, the crowd noise was just too much. Also, the lighting I felt was too bright at the table, it was too garish. I thought the losers lounge also just kind of looked too garish and tacky to really be effective. Yeah, again, as I mentioned, it's they're playing for charity. They're friends with each other. It's just sort of banter. Everybody knows that this is just a lighthearted poker show. It's not highbrow or anything. It's not trying to pretend to be anything it's not. But would I watch any of this again? No. I mean, the Anthony Anderson hand I might watch again. I have seen that before, just because of just how crazy that is. Also, like Alex Trebek and Amber Tamblyn were at that table too. It's just kind of weird. Like that is sort of one element. It's like these celebrities who would have never interacted with each other all interact with each other. There's like a little bit of novelty to that. But like, would I recommend this to anybody? I mean, if you're just looking at mid 2000s celebrity culture and television and you're just bored and maybe you're a little drunk, okay, sure, go ahead and watch this. Otherwise, you could probably skip it.
Yeah, I'd say it's a 2 out of 5, but it's kind of like a strong 2 out of 5 for me as far as an experience. It's bad. If you like some of these celebrities, watch their episode, maybe you'll enjoy them, but otherwise, find something else better, probably.
Yep.
I think that about covers it for now, guys. I think our next episode might be recapping this year in totality, and so that'll be coming up relatively soonish. And otherwise, guys, enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, and enjoy your poker on TV.
Shuffle up and deal.
Bye, guys.